What we're going to do is to set the tone, we'll just give a quick overview of a project that Dan and I have been working on for the past year, the top threats in cloud computing, and to talk about what these threats are. And then Dan's going to come up, and we're going to spend most of the time talking to the panel. And start thinking of questions now, because if you have some, I'll throw out this lovely nice ass t-shirt. I have a whole bunch up here, so you can let everyone know that you have a nice ass. So Dan and I, about a year ago, started a project called the Top Threats for the Cloud Security Alliance. And the goal of that was, we all knew that there were threats associated with cloud computing, but we didn't feel that there was a good consensus on what those threats were. So we got a group of really smart people together and got a consensus on what those were. And this is a living project, and I'll talk at the end about how you can help us to make this even better going forward. And we ended up with 7, so it seemed logical that we called it the 7 deadly sins of cloud computing. So, in Catholic lore, the 7 deadly sins are the capital sins, because if you commit them, you suffer eternal death. I think if you commit these sins in the cloud, your job is going to suffer eternal death. So
didn't they recently add 7 more? I think I read about that a couple years ago.
So we're up to 14 already?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did this about a year ago. You can see all the people that we brought together. That was just to get things kicked off, and now we've kind of made this public. I'll show you where there's a web page you can go to so that you can suggest additions to the list and suggest changes. We did our best to pull in people that were representing vendors and researchers and consumers of cloud computing. So let's walk through what those 7 are. So let's start off with WRAth, shared technology vulnerabilities. So when you're deploying things in the cloud, regardless of if it's IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, you're obviously riding on an underlying architecture. Now, what if there are vulnerabilities in that architecture? Well, obviously, you can suffer the consequences of that. We had a good example of that here at Blackhat last year, where Kostya Korchinski did a talk that discussed how there was vulnerability in virtual device drivers on virtually every version of VMware, both client and server, and you could use that to break out of your virtual machine and access the actual underlying hardware. So if that was the case, hey, the multi-tenant architecture becomes a real problem for you in the cloud. Next up, Lust, account and service hijacking. Obviously, if I can get a hold of someone's account credentials, not only is there a confidentiality risk, because I can get a hold of data that is confidential and private, but I could use their account for things that they would rather you not do. And of course, there are reputational damages that can occur from that, and possibly even legal consequences. We've seen situations or reports publicly that we know that attackers have used the cloud for their own purposes, but we've seen some reports whereby those are actually compromised accounts that are being used for botnet command and control servers. Data loss, data leakage, vanity. So obviously, if you're in a multi-tenant architecture, the whole idea is that your data is segregated from somebody else's data, and there's no way for pool A to see pool B. And if that is violated, then we have issues of data integrity and confidentiality. Really interesting piece of research from UC San Diego and MIT, where they did a piece of research that was really 2 chunks. One chunk was an effort to be able to predict where a new virtual machine would be placed in the cloud so that they could increase the likelihood that they would get their virtual image on the same physical piece of hardware. And they felt that they had some techniques to be able to increase the likelihood of that. And then if they were able to succeed in doing that, then they could do some cross-channel attacks to be able to get information about another image on that same piece of physical hardware. They weren't actually able to see data, but they were able to do things like see when there was a heavy computational load on another image, and discussed how those sorts of pieces of information could be helpful in other attack scenarios. Sloth, insecure APIs. Much of the cloud is driven by APIs. That's how you're able to utilize the functionality which is made available to you in the cloud. But who built those APIs, and are they secure? You kind of have to take the vendor's word for it. And an example of that, our very own Dan Hubbard and Stefan Chenette did a talk at OzCert in 2009, where they looked at a lot of different APIs that were out there, a lot of Twitter APIs primarily, and found that not only may they not be secure, but that the individuals using them to build their own services, their own mashups, very often did not utilize the security features made available to them. Avarice or greed. Hopefully the employees at the company you're dealing with, the cloud vendor you're working with, are not greedy and that they're not trying to go after your information, because we have the problem of malicious insiders. Here, there are people at that cloud vendor who have access to your data that are obviously not on your payroll, so you have limited ability to vet those individuals. Again, you have to place some trust in your cloud provider. We'll probably never know the answer to it, but with the Google attack at the beginning of the year, there were some suggestions that perhaps insiders had helped to aid that particular attack. For envy, we have the unknown risk profile. You don't know what risks you face because there is information at that cloud vendor that may not be shared with you. Perhaps there's a breach that they've not shared with you. Perhaps there's a hole in some of their processes, like their patch cycles. You don't see that. Again, you must place trust in the provider. When the Heartland data systems or the Heartland payment systems breach occurred, one of the comments was that they did the absolute minimum required by law, and they did very little to go above and beyond that to let people know that their accounts had been compromised. I'm missing one slide, which is the nefarious use of service. And so that's the one that I think this panel will probably focus a lot on. And so all the other 6 were focused on you're deploying something in the cloud and, is your system secure? But then on the flip side, hey, the attackers like to use the cloud too. Why? Same reasons we like to. It's relatively cheap and we have access to very powerful resources. Well, from an attacker's perspective, that's very valuable because, for a relatively low cost, and hey, you're probably paying with a stolen credit card anyway, you can be doing things like password cracking or conducting denial of service attacks. So using the cloud is a very attractive prospect to the attackers as well. So what are we going to do with this project from here? So we've got our 7 deadly sins. Well, now we want to keep revising that. We want input from everybody who's out there in the public. So hey, maybe next year this is the 12 deadly sins or the 14 deadly sins. We'll find out. Sorry, we're a little out of order there. So there's nefarious use of service. We did a survey once we finished the top threats, and this is what people said they were most worried about. Data loss was at the top, but that second one, again, something I think will come out in the panel, obviously people are worried that, hey, the cloud will be abused and it will be used to attack my company. 17.8% said that was their top concern. So if you want to participate, and I encourage you to do so, the URL at the top, just go to cloudsecurityalliance.org, and if you go to top threats, that's where you'll find this particular form. So if you want to add something to this list, this is where you fill it out and give us some details and some examples of that, just as I've already shown you. And what we'll do is we'll compile all of that, and then we'll give it to a judging panel who will decide, what gets added and what gets taken away. And I certainly encourage you to do that because that's what's going to help make this better. And with that, I will hand it over to Dan to launch the panel. Do you want me to throw these up?
Sure. Is this on here? Yeah.
I'm the only one with the microphone. I'm the only one with it, so I guess I'm the only one allowed to talk. That's a laser.
That's a big laser pointer. All right, we'll do our best.
Okay.
I was thinking about the people on the panel, what's interesting about it. And actually, I don't think I've ever been part of or have seen a panel with people that are securing as many servers as these folks are. We're probably talking close to 1 million servers, I would say, between Facebook, AWS, Rackspace, and Microsoft, if not probably more than that. So, 1 million plus machines that are out there. That's a lot of stuff. So, I'd like to first off introduce everybody. If you could just hold your hand up. We've got Steve Riley from Amazon Web Services, Chris St. Myers from Rackspace. We've got Michael Sutton down here from Zscaler, Michael Panico from Microsoft, Alex Rice from Facebook, and then our token bad guy, if you will, a researcher, will be Stephen Adair from Shadow Server.
Bad guy is not the description I would use.
Yeah. Not Shadow Crew, Shadow Server. I've sat through a lot of panels, particularly at RSA, those long, boring panels. So I'm trying to make sure that people don't say the following terms. I found the most popular following terms. You guys can't see the screen here. It's cooperation between private and public sector. To be honest, a standards-based approach, absolutely. We're committed to, and at the end of the day, are all banned phrases.
We are committed to a standards-based approach.
Absolutely. All right, so the first question I'd like to ask for the panel, we'll start on my left here, is what type of abuse are you seeing today in the cloud, and do you believe there's a problem, and how big is the problem? Start off with Rackspace.
All right, a lot of the stuff that I see is, depending on the platform. I mean, we have a couple different platforms, and so, people not updating applications and stuff that they're running in the cloud, and so that puts a lot of unpatched, unupdated applications in a very small IP space that's very easy to scan for, and that's a big problem. And getting people to understand that's their responsibility. And then from an abuse of the cloud resources, I guess the biggest thing I see is takeover of unsecured servers and general fraud, I guess, that I see. And no matter how good your fraud process is, stuff will slide through, and the key is to catch that as quick as you can before they do too much. So we've got various processes in place that I guess kind of look for that, and those are the. I don't see it as a big problem right now, at least from where I'm looking at, but definitely an issue and something I'm working with a lot of our guys to keep an eye on and put stricter controls around.
Great, thanks.
One of the things that makes this a bit difficult is our respect for customer privacy is extremely high. So since we can't go poking around inside people's VMs and say, are you a nice guy? We often have to rely on external reports. Although lately we're getting better with our own internal heuristics at looking at what's going on at the network. For example, a few months ago, we detected the existence of a Zeus botnet controller on some AWS nodes. And as far as I know, that is the first time where we have actually gone in and terminated instances without notifying the owner, because they were fraudulently obtained, and we figured out what they were doing because it was just network traffic totally unlike anything we'd ever seen before, and so we killed those things. It's kind of the same thing with the SIP abuse issue that came a few months later. Our growing body of heuristics and understanding of what's normal, we were able to figure that one out. But that was definitely an external report. We didn't know that in the beginning.
Great. Stephen, what have you seen with Shadow Server data? You guys collect a ton of data out there.
Yeah, so the external report's quite fitting. Shadow Server being kind of like at the 30,000-foot view of all this. We're not a provider, but we pretty much go through all kinds of botnets and command and control servers, do a lot of monitoring, and we provide those reports to different providers. I don't know if all of you guys, and some of you on this panel, get our report. So if we see a Z-bot or a Torpid controller or any other type of